The Victorian steam locomotive is a powerful evocation of a lost time and way of life. Before motorways, airports, and the humble e-scooter, there were metal behemoths charging up and down the country, adorned in their flashiest colours and decorations to promote their operators, constructors, and passenger demographic. Their prowess was no greater than during the Race to the North, held in 1895 between the competing West Coast and East Coast main lines. These iron racehorses had complex, aesthetically elegant designs worthy of scale models, but until modern technology advanced enough, they never graced the ready-to-run market. While Mallard and the Flying Scotsman get refined releases every other year, other engines aren't so lucky. But when they do come along, it can be difficult to take your eyes off them. One engine is the Great Northern Stirling Single, a performer on the losing side of the races, but on looks it had the best in show, hands down. Rapido originally released this engine in model form back in 2018, and it sold so hotly second-hand examples have retailed for almost £600, far above the original £250 selling price. Never did I imagine myself getting hold of one of these, but as if sensing the popular demand, Rapido announced a second run with some additional tooling variations. A bargain compared to second-hand prices. The Locomotion model's exclusive release of the engine in museum condition returned for a price of £249.95. Not wanting to miss this effectively huge discount, I turned into Fry. The model arrived in a stunning black box containing a nice white line drawing of the engine. I went for the museum condition exclusive, as this is the only way I've seen the engine. Inside was a very informative leaflet. Feel free to pause to read these pages further. In summary, Rapido has outlined how to handle the model, as well as the differences between this model and the first batch of Stirling Singles. They provided information on how to use the model's 8-pin tender connection, and how to fit the splashers should you wish to. There was also some guidance on how to check the model over and run it in. Importantly though, there was a warning about analog controllers, and just like recent Acura scale releases, the Stirling Single is not to be used with any older analog controllers. As stated in the booklet, an accessory bag features the splashers, 3-link couplers, an additional NEM coupler and brake pipes. A separate bag includes the screws for fitting the splashers. These were missing on the new tender tooling models, so if you find yours missing, get in contact with Rapido using their warranty form and they will be able to supply them. First things first, let's get the tender and loco connected. With the pins and sockets aligned, all it needs is a firm push to clip them together. With all that out the way, just look at this thing. The fidelity of the design and decoration is second to none. The Great Northern green, with black and white lining and wheel arch lining, is fine and precise. It really looks like a museum quality model. The tender's lining separates the two shades of green flawlessly, and inside the tender shell are the factory fitted speaker, 21-pin digital decoder socket, and the PCB for the engine. That does mean that the engine cannot run without a tender, so everything hinges on the functionality of that pin connection. It's a risky design, but must be robust if Rapido has gone with it as their main choice for the second production run. The main engine has a die-cast chassis, while the boiler and cab are of plastic design with metal parts. While the real-life engine only has the one set of driving wheels, the rear axle here is also driven, meaning the engine is 4-wheel drive. Without the splashers, it will graze second radius curves or greater. The front of the engine has a separately fitted smokebox dart, lamp irons and wraparound handrails, while the buffers are sprung. Guard irons are attached, but besides that, all the other buffer beam detail is in the accessory bag. The dominating driving wheels look tough and powerful, painted in a green matching the bodywork. Brake rigging and pipe work around the wheels comes pre-fitted, saving a potentially fiddly job, but it does mean you have to mind your fingers. Returning to the tender, even the inside is lined, fitted with handrails and a toolbox. A separately fitted water tank filler cap is fitted next to a questionable coal load. While it's not the worst we've seen recently, I'm looking at you, Bullet Leader, it's not the best, and it doesn't really give the coal rails much to do. The cab controls though are fantastic, if simple compared to a lot of later period engines. The glazing is great, looking about right for the real life engine. Quality wise, everything is pretty sound, with a few slightly wonky separate bits here and there, such as the whistle. Considering the intricacy of the decoration, like all the lining on the tender frames and footsteps, it's a tremendous feat of overall quality Rapido has pulled off. Underneath there is even more underframe detailing that takes the model the extra mile. You can also see the wiper pickups on the driving axle and the rear axle, making this 4-wheel pickup as well as 4-wheel drive. The underside of the tender connection can also be inspected, showing just how tightly packed the bundle of wires is. On the scales, Loco and tender come in at 266 grams, which is a decent weight, though not the heaviest steam engine out there. Back-to-back gauging of the wheels comes in at 14.4 to 14.7mm, which is a tad varied but close to the standard and the fine scale standard. Overall, the engine is a masterpiece of miniature locomotive design, and the fact that the model is based on laser 3D scans of the real engine really shows. It's easy to see why the initial run was so coveted, driving the second-hand prices up astronomically. Bringing this back was an economic slam dunk for Rapido. Now, let's get the Single running on the layout. Straight out of the box, the engine has a nice, slow crawling speed in both directions. It's nice and smooth even when the speed is turned up. That's thanks to a smooth running mechanism consisting of a can motor with a flywheel. Thanks to the 4-wheel pickup and drive, the Single glides smoothly over my streamline point work. Baseboard joins are also traversed with the same ease. A nice, faint ebbing firebox LED helps enliven the open cab. Time for an inaugural lap of the layout. The engine simply flies over the road crossing and the curved baseboard joins. None of the other obstacles fazed it. It's a great runner. So the engine is a sterling performer, and on this occasion the engine we're testing was actually involved in some racing in real life. So it's only appropriate that I hand the Stirling Single over to my train racing driver. Some say that the LNWR problem class was named after him, and that he once used an elephant on shunting duties while working in Sheffield. All we know is he's called the Grant. There he is, standing right above Rapido's swanky tender connection. He'll suffer a very painful demise should it fail. Let's hope not. And off they go, and across the newly laid road crossing. Quickly they're onto the second board. The Stirling dashes along Deltic Pass like it's 1895 all over again. Round by the farm towards the final board, the Single heads back into the future station area and across the line. And the Rapido Great Northern Stirling Single did the lap in 15.94 seconds, which is a scale speed of 63.3 miles per hour. My fiance wrote this one out, and she won't admit it, but she does like the speedy lap times. That's a tad on the fast side, considering the real-life Stirling Singles topped out at about 85 miles per hour. So at 50% speed on the controller, this should have been doing no more than 40 to 45 miles an hour at scale speed. Single drive axle locomotives such as this are incredibly difficult to model, design, motorise and get the gearing right. It's a really tricky business, and we can't be too harsh on Rapido for having a solid crack at the issue. So, yeah, water under the bridge. Time to test the couplings. I have no Great Northern rolling stock, so the ever-present BR Mark I coaches return. Everything's coupled up on the first attempt. Marvellous. And off the train goes around the layout. There's some additional weight to test the tender connection clips now, but so far it seems to be holding firm. While the Stirling Single is unlikely to usurp my favourite prototypes in my collection, this is a damn good model of an engine often overlooked by the general populace. It encapsulates the beauty and finesse put into Victorian engine design, something that was somewhat lost following the First World War as tastes and needs changed. How much more beautiful would the world be if beauty and passion drove design rather than economics? On to my final verdict. Decoration. This nails every aspect of this department. You just have to look at the model and see that. It looks awesome in person, on a screen, up close or from afar. It easily gets the point from me. Details and features. Laser scanned from the real engine, everything you'd expect you get. From the optional splashes to buffer beam detailing, all that's missing are period crew figures. Some details look a bit squiff, like the coal load, but not enough to ruin anything. As provided, it does excellently on this front too. Quality. This was almost spotless, except for some slightly wonky details. The engine is solid with a die-cast chassis and smooth mechanism. It easily clears my expectations here. Performance. The model ran well over bore joints, point work, set track curves, and coupled up well on the first attempt. While running is smooth, it is geared too quickly for my liking to operate at an accurate scale speed. Going from a crawl to 65 miles an hour happened between 30% and 50% power on the controller, so there is a sharp uptick in speed. On the whole though, I'm happy with how it performed. It didn't leave the track once or drop its train. The firebox LED was well lit and a great touch to the open cab. I'll give it the point. And finally, onto price. Compared to the second-hand prices these went for before the second batch was announced, this is a bargain when bought new at full price. It looks, feels and runs like a premier model, putting quality behind its asking price. It's dressed beautifully and runs beautifully, if a tad overzealously. I'm glad I paid £250 for this, and that a second run came around. Otherwise this would have been one of those engines I'd probably never have owned. Overall, that's a score of 5 out of 5, making this an essential engine I can recommend to any steam enthusiast. It pleased me in all departments. Remember rule 1 guys, get it if you want it. If you got one of the examples with the newly tooled tender, let me know how it compares down in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.